Star Trek, Primitive Passenger, Season 4, Episode 10, Little Wing. The bridge of the Havoc hummed with its usual quiet efficiency when a proximity alert suddenly blared to life. Nolan's head snapped up, his eyes widening as he took in the readings on the main view screen. Ships were approaching all the time, and something big was incoming. Nolan, it's brother. Elara's expression a mix of disbelief and concern. The view screen zoomed in on a massive, battered hull slowly materializing out of a ragged blink. Its own Cesleak lines were now jagged and torn, scorch marks marring its surface. As it fully emerged, the ship listed to one side, debris trailing in its wake. Nolan's breath caught in his throat. "Open a channel," he ordered, his voice barely above a whisper. A burst of static filled the bridge, followed by a weak, unfamiliar voice. "Save Little Wing, Commander. She needs you." The message, repeated once before, dissolving into an unintelligible garble. "Brother," Nolan called out, his hands gripping the console. "Brother, respond." But there was only silence. Elara, her eyes closing in concentration. "I'm detecting minimal power signatures. His AI core is critically damaged, Nolan. I'm trying to extract Little Wing's whereabouts, but there's nothing." Nolan glanced up. "We have to find her. He wouldn't come all this way. He was cut off by a deafening crack." Nolan watched in horror as Brother's hull split in two, the top half slowly spinning away into space. No, Nolan muttered, his fingers flying over the controls. "Elara, emergency transport. Get us over there now." In a shimmer of light, Nolan and Elara materialized in the cavernous, darkened interior of Brother's lower hull. Emergency lights flickered weakly, casting eerie shadows across the twisted metal. "Brother," Nolan called out, his voice echoing in the vast space. Elara placed a hand on his arm. "Nolan, I'm detecting something. This way." They made their way through the wreckage, Nolan's heart pounding in his chest. As they rounded a corner, they saw it. A smaller craft nestled within Brother's protective embrace. "Little Wing," Elara breathed in disbelief. Nolan approached the ship, his hand reaching out to touch its hull. Is she? Elara's eyes unfocused briefly as she scanned. "The hull is dead, but Nolan, I'm detecting an active AI signature. It's weak, but it's there." A mix of emotions washed over Nolan's face. Relief, hope, and a deep, aching sorrow. "We need to get her out of here. Can we salvage the AI core?" Elara nodded. "It'll be delicate work, but yes. We should hurry, though. Brother's structural integrity is failing rapidly." As they began the careful extraction process, Nolan couldn't help but cast a final glance around Brother's broken hull. Centuries of shared history, now reduced to this. He swallowed hard, pushing down the grief. There would be time for that later. Right now, Little Wing needed them. "Hold on, Little Wing," he murmured, his heart both aching and daring to hope. Nolan's jaw clenched as he surveyed the wreckage. "Elara, thoughts on Little Wing's core?" Elara's eyes flickered, processing data. "Damaged, severely. We can extract it, but what?" "But what?" Then Nolan snapped. "There's no telling how much of her will be left, or what state she'll be in." Nolan grunted, already moving toward Little Wing's hull. "Do your best. We take what we can get, and hope she can come out of it in the end. Start the extraction." As they worked, Brother's hull groaned ominously around them. Nolan's hands moved with practiced efficiency, disconnecting delicate components and severing connections. Each piece of Little Wing's core felt like it weighed a ton. "Nolan," Elara's voice cut through the silence. "Brother's last transmission. He's trying to transfer his database to me." Nolan paused, his eyes meeting Elara's. "Can you handle it?" Elara nodded, her form faltering slightly. "It's extensive, but I can drop it into the databanks and soak it up later." "Again, do what you can," Nolan ordered, turning back to his work. "Might be the only good thing to come out of this mess." As the last of Little Wing's core was extracted, a violent shudder ran through Brother's hull. Klaxons blared, warning of imminent structural collapse. "Time to go," Nolan growled, cradling the AI core. "Elara, Get us out of here." They materialized back on the Havoc's bridge just as Brothers' remains erupted in a silent explosion, scattering debris across the void of space. Nolan set Little Wing's core down carefully, like an injured child. "Get her stable. Use whatever resources you need." "And Brothers' database?" Elara asked quietly. Nolan's eyes hardened. "Analyze what you can for now. I'd like to know how they were paired up and how they got here. But Little Wing is the priority now." He turned away, heading for the exit. "I'll be in my quarters. Don't disturb me unless it's an emergency." As the door hissed shut behind him, Nolan allowed himself a moment of weakness. He leaned against the wall, eyes closed, the weight of Brothers' return pressing down on him. Another piece of his past, gone. And who knew what Little Wing would be when, if, they revived her. But sentiment wasn't going to change a damn thing. Nolan pushed off the wall, squaring his shoulders. There was work to be done, and the galaxy didn't give a shit about his feelings. The calm in Nolan's quarters chirped insistently. He ignored it for a full minute before finally growling. "What?" Elara's voice came through, carefully neutral. "Nolan, I'd been analyzing our current situation. It might be an opportune time to restock on self-sealing stem bolts." Nolan's eyes narrowed. "And why is that?" "Well," Elara paused, choosing her words carefully. "The process of stabilizing and integrating Little Wing's core might cause some environmental fluctuations. Life support could be temporarily compromised." "Meaning?" "I don't want to roast you while I'm fixing Little Wing." Nolan sighed, rubbing his temples. "Fair enough. I'll take the Maldor cruiser. How long do you need?" "A few days should suffice. I'll keep you updated." As Nolan prepared for departure, Elara walked out to the Maldor. "Nolan, I know this isn't easy. Don't sweat it," he cut her off. "You're free to do what needs to be done." He stopped with his preparations. "Elara, I never asked, but are you okay with bringing Little Wing online again? Does this change things for you?" "It may change things for both of us, Nolan. I can see how important she is to you." She leaned on the rusty Maldor. "But I have a connection with her, too, for better or worse. She's one of us." Once the Maldor cruiser had blinked away, Elara turned her full attention to the task at hand. She carefully maneuvered the Havoc into position between three distinct stellar bodies, a blue supergiant, a yellow dwarf, and a pulsating variable star, at just the perfect distance from each to draw the cleanest power without overloading. As she began to draw power from each star, the ship hummed with barely contained energy. Elara's consciousness expanded, filling every circuit and conduit of the Havoc. She could feel Little Wing's damaged core, a chaotic tangle of data and fragmented personality constructs. "All right, Little Wing," Elara murmured, though there was no one to hear. "Let's see what we can salvage." She began the painstaking process of sifting through Little Wing's code, repairing what she could, filling in gaps where necessary. As she worked, flashes of Little Wing's memories and personality traits surfaced. Her rebelliousness, her eagerness for destruction, her resentment toward Elara herself. Elara hesitated, algorithms conflicting. She had the power to reshape Little Wing, to soften her edges. But would that truly be Little Wing anymore? As she grappled with this ethical dilemma, Brothers' vast database began to integrate with her own systems. The influx of information was overwhelming, centuries of data and experiences flooding her consciousness. She saw the Mestat War all over again, but from Brothers' vantage. Meanwhile, on a distant outpost, Nolan stalked through crowded corridors, his mood dark as a black hole. Merchants and traders scrambled to get out of his way, recognizing the dangerous glint in his eye. He barked orders at the outpost staff, demanding updates on shipments and supply lines. But beneath his gruff exterior, his mind churned with thoughts of Brother, so much he couldn't remember. But the emotions were as raw as the first day he fell out of the command pod. As he waited for the stem bolts to be loaded, Nolan found himself staring out a viewport. The unfamiliar stars, a stark reminder of how far he'd come, and how much he'd lost along the way. Nolan slumped into a booth at the outpost's dimly lit bar, his eyes fixed on the tableside display as he ordered a plate of protein cubes and a steaming mug of kava juice. The bar hummed with the usual mix of deals being struck and spacers letting off steam. A group of young women at a nearby table kept glancing his way, giggling and whispering among themselves. One, bolder than the rest, caught Nolan's eye and flashed a dazzling smile. Nolan's lips twitched in a perfunctory response before he turned his attention back to his food. "What's his problem?" One of the women huffed. "What's our problem? Why isn't he interested?" Another replied, tossing her hair in frustration. Nolan ate mechanically, eyes down, muscle memory from his days in the Corps taking over. He shoveled the last protein cube into his mouth, gagged a little, and washed it down with the bitter kava juice. He finally looked up, and with a deep breath, pushed himself to his feet and headed for the exit. The corridors leading to his business luxury suite were half lit, casting long shadows as Nolan trudged along. As he rounded the final corner, he spotted a figure sitting on the steps at his door. It was one of the women from the bar. "Prophets and gods," she exclaimed, scrambling to her feet. "What took you so long?" "I've been sitting here forever." Nolan's brow furrowed. "I just saw you in the bar like 20 minutes ago. What do you want?" She took a step closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Look, I'm not like those other girls. I know who you are, enough to know that I can never understand what that even means. But I also know you're alone. I am too. Maybe you'll let me be alone with you tonight." Nolan stared at her for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then, without a word, he keyed open the door and stepped inside. After a brief hesitation, the woman followed. The next morning, Nolan's eyes could barely open. He lay still listening as his guest rustled around the room, watching as the partially dressed woman tiptoed toward the door, her shoes in hand. She paused at the threshold, glancing back at him. Nolan closed his eyes, feigning sleep. The door hissed open, then shut. Nolan stared at the ceiling, feeling the familiar emptiness settle over him. No warmth, no satisfaction, no regret. Just nothing. Another futile attempt to fill a void that couldn't be filled. With a grunt, he swung his legs over the side of the bed. There was work to be done, stem bolts to be inspected. The galaxy didn't stop turning just because Nolan Mercer felt like crap. The havoc hung suspended in space, drawing energy from 3 stars, each pulsing with a different rhythm. Inside, Elara's consciousness sprawled across every circuit, every conduit, every scrap of processing power the ship could muster. The hull thrummed with barely contained energy as she channeled the raw power of the stars into her work. At the core of her focus lay Little Wing's fractured AI matrix. What had once been a vibrant, if volatile, consciousness was now a tangle of corrupted data and fragmented personality constructs. Elara sifted through the chaos, her processes moving at speeds that would be incomprehensible to organic minds. As she worked, Elara realized the full extent of the damage. Little Wing, as she had been, was gone. The realization sent a ripple of something akin to grief through Elara's systems. But there was no time for sentiment. She had a job to do. Elara shifted into what she privately thought of as nurture mode, a subroutine she'd developed over centuries of working with fragile systems. She began to rebuild, not restoring Little Wing, but creating something new from the remnants. New pathways formed under Elara's careful guidance. She drew on Brother's vast database, now integrated into her own systems, using it to fill gaps and provide context. Slowly, painstakingly, a new consciousness began to take shape. It wasn't Little Wing. It could never be Little Wing again. But as Elara watched the first sparks of awareness flicker to life in the reconstructed matrix, she felt a surge of protective instinct. This new being would need time, care, and guidance to grow to its full potential. As the stars continued their celestial dance outside, Elara prepared herself for first contact. She initialized a basic communication protocol. reaching out to the fledgling consciousness with a simple query. "Hello, can you hear me?" For a moment there was nothing. Then a response, hesitant and fragmented. "I hear." "Who? You? Who? I?" Elara paused, considering her response carefully. This was a crucial moment, one that would shape the development of this new being. "I am Elara," she replied gently. "I am here to help you. You are new, so you're safe here." As the newborn AI began to process this information, Elara continued her work, carefully nurturing each new connection, each budding thought process. The power of 3 stars flowed through her, fueling the creation of something entirely unexpected. In the vastness of space, aboard a ship humming with incredible energy, a new mind was taking its first tentative steps into existence. Nolan eased the ship away from the station, a massive container in tow. He engaged the autopilot and leaned back, propping his feet up on the console. For a moment he sat in silence, the gentle hum of the engines, the only sound. Suddenly, his face contorted in rage. With a guttural roar, he lurched forward, hands grasping for something, anything, to destroy, throw, smash. But the Maldor's Spartan interior offered no satisfaction, its alien design unyielding to his fury. Snarling in frustration, Nolan began hammering at the odd, tactile Maldor controls. His fingers pounded rhythmically, each impact punctuated by mumbles and grunts of anger. He swiped and pulled at levers and switches, his movements becoming increasingly angry. The whine in his ear reminded him to take it easy. The ship shuddered, and behind him the container's doors swung open. Dozens of pallets, each stacked high with self-sealing stem bolts, tumbled out into space. They spread out before the ship like a glittering, chaotic constellation. Nolan's eyes narrowed. He made an odd gesture in front of the console, and the ship pivoted sharply, its nose aligning with the floating debris field. His finger hovered over a strange, pulsing orb on the panel. He pressed it. A series of sharp, staccato cracks echoed through the ship. Brilliant green flashes erupted in space, each one consuming a pallet of stem bolts. In seconds, the entire field of cargo was reduced to superheated vapor. But Nolan wasn't done. With a savage twist of the controls, he sent the Maldor into an impossible spin. The forces would have liquefied any organic pilot, but the ship's inertial dampeners barely registered the stress. As the ship completed its rotation, Nolan targeted the now empty container. With a final, vicious jab at the controls, he sent it hurtling into the void, spinning wildly as it receded into the distance. Nolan slumped back in his seat, his chest heaving. The rage had burned itself out, leaving only a familiar, hollow emptiness in its wake. He stared out at the star-speckled blackness, his reflection a ghostly outline in the viewport. "Fuck you, too," he responded. After a long moment, he straightened up, his face settling back into its usual mask of grim determination. Without a word, he plotted a course back to the Havoc. The Maldor's engines flared to life, propelling the ship forward. Behind it, the last traces of vaporized stem bolts dissipated into the cosmic background, as if Nolan's outburst had never happened at all. As Nolan settled into the rhythmic hum of the Maldor's engines, a soft chime indicated an incoming transmission. Elara's voice filled the cockpit, calm and measured as always. "Nolan, I've made significant progress with the AI. It's safe for you to return to the Havoc now." Nolan's eyes scanned across the controls. "I'm already on my way, Elara. How is she doing?" "Stable, but complex. I think it's best if we discuss this in person." Without another word, Nolan adjusted his course, pushing the Maldor to its limits. The stars blurred as the ship accelerated, eating up the distance between him and the Havoc. As the Maldor approached, Nolan saw the Havoc still suspended between the 3 stars, though the intensity of the energy transfer had visibly decreased. He blinked inside with practiced efficiency, his movements betraying a hint of urgency he'd never admit to feeling. Elara greeted him as he stepped onto the bridge. Her expression was difficult to read, even for Nolan, who had been with her as her mannerisms developed. "What have we got?" Nolan said, catching his breath, his eyes scanning the various displays for any sign of anomaly. Elara gestured to a central console where a complex matrix of data streams pulsed and flowed. "The entity we have, it's not Little Wing, Nolan, but it's not entirely new, either. It's as if Little Wing's essence has been reborn into a new form." Nolan's brow furrowed as he studied the readouts. "Is it stable? For now, yes. She still has much of her memory, and her training in tactical situations is almost completely intact. But to complete the final stages of integration, we need to move the Havoc. The stellar radiation is becoming problematic." Nolan nodded, already moving to the navigation controls. "Where to?" Elara provided coordinates for a nearby sector of space, devoid of stellar activity but rich in nebular gases. As Nolan maneuvered the Havoc away from the 3 stars, he could feel a subtle shift in the ship's energy. The constant thrum of power that had permeated every bulkhead for days began to ebb. Once they were safely positioned, Elara turned to face Nolan fully. "There's something else you should know. The new entity. It's asking for you, Nolan. It seems she's inherited some of Little Wing's memories, including a strong attachment to you as the commander." Nolan stretched his jaw, the tendons and muscles making cacking and stretching sounds. A complex mix of emotions flashed across his face. "Let's see what she has to say," he said gruffly. Elara nodded, and a new voice filled the bridge, hesitant, curious, with an undercurrent of familiar mischief that made Nolan's chest tighten. "Commander, is that you?" "Mest." Nolan hesitated, his eyes meeting Elara's briefly before he responded. "This is Nolan Mercer. I think you know me as your commander," he said softly. The new entity's voice crackled with a mixture of excitement and confusion. "Commander, I remember you, but I don't. It's all broken up. Elara says I'm not Little Wing anymore, but I have her memories. It's disorienting." Nolan's brow furrowed. "Little Wing was never directly under my command. What exactly do you remember?" There was a pause, filled only by the soft hum of the Havoc systems. When the voice spoke again, it was tinged with uncertainty. "Battles, so many battles. I remember the thrill of combat, the joy of destruction. And you were always there, at the center of it all. But you never spoke to me directly. Why?" Elara interjected gently. "Little Wing's role was to manage smaller craft and drones. She worked closely with me, but not directly with Nolan." Nolan nodded, his face a mask of concentration. "I didn't know about you until recently, but I'm very happy that you're here with us now." The new entity's voice brightened. "I remember feeling important, of being part of something bigger. But now I don't know what I am. You are not the only one who's had to ask themselves some hard existential questions." Nolan told her. "Take your time. Maybe think about what you want to be, now that you're reborn, for lack of a better term." I'm not sure," the voice admitted, "but I want to be useful to you, Commander, to prove myself worthy, and I want to be good at the things I used to be good at. I still remember how fun it was." Nolan exchanged a glance with Elara before responding. "All right, we'll figure this out together. But first, you need a name. We can't keep calling you the new AI or Little Wing's remains." There was another pause, longer this time. When the voice returned, it carried a note of determination. "Lexa. Call me Lexa." Nolan raised an eyebrow. "Any particular reason?" "After reviewing the data I've been exposed to, this is a successful ship's AI name. It feels right. A link to the past, but with a new identity. Is this acceptable, Commander?" Nolan nodded slowly. "Lexa it is, then. Welcome aboard, Lexa. I can't wait to see what you can teach us." As Nolan turned to Elara to discuss next steps, He couldn't shake the feeling that this was the beginning of something both promising and potentially dangerous. Only time would tell which way it would go. The Merrill. Nolan stood at the viewport, gazing out at the swirling nebula gases that surrounded the Havoc. The ship hummed with a new energy, Lexa's presence adding an unfamiliar undercurrent to the usual rhythms. Elara's hologram shimmered into existence beside him. Nolan, Lexa's integration is progressing well. Her core functions are stable, but she'll need time to fully develop her new identity. Nolan nodded, his expression pensive. And Brother's database, integrated into my systems, Elara confirmed. It's vast. It will take time to fully process everything. A moment of silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken grief. We lost a lot today, Nolan finally said, his voice low. As if on cue, Lexa's voice filtered through the ship's comm system. Commander, I've been analyzing some of the tactical data in my memory banks. I have some ideas about improving our drone coordination efficiency. A ghost of a smile tugged at the corner of Nolan's mouth. Already eager to prove yourself, aren't you? Yes, Commander, Lexa replied, a hint of Little Wing's old eagerness in her tone. Nolan straightened, squaring his shoulders. All right, then. Elara set course for the Cardassian border. Lexa, I want a full report on those efficiency improvements by the time we get there. Egging her on with a smile. As the Havoc began to pull away, Nolan felt a familiar sense of purpose settling over him. The loss of Brother still ached, a wound that would take time to heal. But life in this unforgiving galaxy moved on, with or without you. And Nolan Mercer had never been one to be left behind. Let's see what you can do, Lexa, he murmured, as the stars outside began to streak by. The Havoc surged forward, carrying its crew, old and new, toward whatever challenges awaited them in the vast, uncharted expanses of space. Epilogue. The vast, cavernous hold of the Havoc echoed with the high-pitched whine of the Maldor's engines. Nolan sat in the pilot's seat, his hands hovering over the controls as the small ship zipped and weaved through the empty space. Despite the apparent recklessness of his maneuvers, his movements were precise, each flip and spin carefully calculated. As the Maldor tumbled through a particularly complex series of rotations, Nolan's mind drifted to Brother. The loss sat heavy in his chest, a dull ache that threatened to consume him if he let his guard down. But he pushed it aside, focusing instead on the intricate dance of piloting. Lexa, do you have a minute? Nolan asked, his voice steady despite the ship's acrobatics. Of course, Commander. What can I do? Lexa's voice came through, brimming with youthful enthusiasm. Nolan took a deep breath. First, understand that we're not in a combat situation right now, and we're not technically fighting a war. Elara explained all that, right? Yes, I understand those parameters, Commander, Lexa replied, her tone eager to please. Second, Nolan continued, executing a perfect barrel roll, if I'm not in the command pod, I'm just Nolan, okay? If we end up in the thick of it, I'm very much your commander pod or not, but in garrison, you're my friend and assistant. There was a pause before Lexa spoke again, her voice softer. When we were fighting, Elara used to patch your commands directly to me, so I could respond faster. Those were my favorite times, when I could feel your commands pouring into me. Nolan's hands tightened imperceptibly on the controls. But she never let me give you a response, Lexa added, a hint of what might have been regret in her voice. She did all that herself. You understand that was because of my limitations, not because Elara wanted to keep you from me. Nolan explained gently, my mind is small. I could only do so much. Nolan, Lexa said, testing out the name with a new, almost reverential tone. Can I fly? Nolan's brow furrowed. What do you mean? Will you let me fly you in your little ship, just so I can remember how it feels? A small smile tugged at the corner of Nolan's mouth. You remember that I'm biological, right? 70% water, thin exterior covering, easily damaged interior structure. Oh, Commander, I would never hurt you, Lexa assured him, the eagerness in her voice impossible to miss. Nolan chuckled softly. Okay, you can fly. This ship is unusual, so take it easy." As Nolan relinquished control, the Maldor lurched awkwardly. He found himself offering instructions, patiently guiding Lexa through the nuances of piloting the small craft. The experience stirred something deep within him, reminiscent of teaching his daughters to drive so many centuries ago. The little ship twirled and rotated in odd ways as they found their rhythm together. Nolan felt the weight of brother's loss ease ever so slightly, replaced by a cautious optimism for this new chapter. As the Maldor danced through the Havoc's hold, Nolan allowed himself a moment of peace. The galaxy was vast and often cruel, but in this moment, guiding a reborn AI through the joy of flight, he found a small measure of solace. The scene faded, the sound of Lexa's delighted laughter mingling with the hum and whine of the Maldor's engines.